second this, that SPC has had this experience too.
So I'll go back and work with Mr. Rayler, who oversees that person. I understand the rationale at the beginning of the school year where we wait until we see what the schools have put in, but I also understand that there's a lead time that's required, so a month is probably not sufficient, so I'll need to circle back with him to say, can we shift the parameters in order to be able to accommodate all of the planning that goes into committing to an event.
Does SUSD use Life Touch photography for school photos? Who chooses school photographers? And what kind of protections are there for student images in those contracts?
So for those who don't know, this has become an issue because there was concern about someone who worked with Life Touch whose name surfaced in the Epstein files. And so that became a concern in terms of what happens with those. So we have, I think, when I was looking today, because we ask it's site-based decisions, so the buildings choose who they work with. We have maybe 3 or 4 that are using Life Touch, and of those, at least 3 said we won't be using them next year because the customer service and the quality of work is pretty poor. And what we work to do, and we do have this with Life Touch and with Dorian, another one that works with a lot of our elementary schools, we have data privacy agreements. And we're gonna make sure that we have those in place for anyone that does school photography. So just like when we're taking pictures, when our communications and marketing team is, some students we don't have authorization to use their photo in any of our marketing. Same would be true here, right? It has limited uses and the company doesn't have any authority to share outside of the specific purpose that the school has contracted with them for.
Okay, that was it for my questions. Does anyone else have a question? No? Checking my time, I can't see. All right, thank you so much, Dr. Menzel. Okay, our next, we need to switch PowerPoints. Next, we're going to hear from the SUSD Foundation.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Raul Zubia, and I am a member of the SUSD Foundation. So we're going to go over a quick introduction of who we are and what we do, and if you have any questions at the end, I'm happy to answer some. So these are the board of directors for the SUSD Foundation. You may recognize some of the names up here. They've been in existence, not these people, but the board has been in existence since 2006. And then this is what we do. We raise funds to support education, teacher training opportunities, and those things that would otherwise go unfunded. And as I said, since 2006, when we started, we've given over $3 million in support of programs and grants for the different schools in SUSD. And then these are our goals, which is to support SUSD and the educational opportunities, identify new opportunities that can further impact the academic and emotional well-being of the students, and then keep the administrative expenses at a minimum to maximize dollars raised so they can go directly to the students and teachers. These are some of the programs that we support. You may recognize some in here. Yeah, the STEM program, the special ed, Camp Invention, Entrepreneur Innovation Center, and at the moment we're talking to Coronado High School about an entrepreneur hub at Coronado. And then one of the things that you may or may not know, but a lot of people don't, we are the ones that fund the School Resource Unity Crisis K-9 program. This is our newest member. This is Farley, and he's of the Desert Mountain Learning Community. And these are the other dogs. And I know one of them's Copper, I know one of them's Captain, but I don't know which one the Golden Retriever is. Anybody? Rocket, thank you. Yes, that should have been easy. That's the oldest one I think we have. So that's what we do. We have we got a nice contribution from a family who funds that, and so that will continue to go on. And somebody asked me earlier if Arcadia High School is going to be part of that learning complex. And we're not sure, only because that's Phoenix and that's a different SRO program, but that's a good question. I'll have to go back and ask and see if that's going to be included. So how do we get these, how do we do all this stuff that we do? Obviously, corporations and donations from individuals and foundations, hence the dog program. But we also do 2 fundraisers. One in April is the golf tournament that's held at Mountain Shadows. That's every year. And then the Ho Ho Holiday Show, and that's in November at Porter's in downtown, Old Town. We do those 2, and then, of course, those are huge money makers for us, and then our regular donations. And then how can you help? Obviously, donations, we ask for donations, but more importantly, I'm asking or telling you that if you have something at your schools, something that you think, a program that might benefit your students, please reach out to us. We'll take a look at it. Maybe we'll be able to do it, but at least you have an avenue of which to go out and ask for that kind of help. And that is it, unless anybody has any questions. All right, thank you. I'm sorry? Go to our foundation website, susdfoundation.org, and you can right there. And Laura, do you remember the date? Yeah, so it's around the 3rd week of April. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to flip, oh, go ahead. I'm going to flip our agenda a little bit because Alexis is still on her way. Do any reps who are here have announcements? No. Hold on, you have to speak into the microphone.
The Mountainside Middle School girls finished 2nd, 4th, and 5th at the cross-country meet. My daughter was 5th.
That's awesome. Congratulations, Mountainside. Okay, so if you would like to review the math curriculum, it's actually available K through 12 because there was an upper level math curriculum committee as well, but the way to see it is the same. So it's here in MDA, available 9 to 3 weekdays. It's easiest to make an appointment, but you can also just show up during those hours. Okay, our upcoming meetings. Next month, we have a morning meeting here in the same room, Wednesday, March 25th, and we will hear from SUSD's athletic director about all of the sports that are offered in the district. Our April meeting is an evening meeting, also here, Wednesday, April 15th. It's going to be on site councils, so each school has one. So this meeting will answer the questions: what is site council? Who is on it? What do they do? And this is a panel discussion with Dr. Sakos and Dr. Banal from the district, and then Dr. Dansky from Arcadia, Ms. Hummin from Pueblo, and Ms. Perry from Yavapai, and Amy Hardy from Mountainside Middle School. Our final meeting of the school year, again on a Wednesday here, it'll be in the morning, is going to be on fine arts and career and technical education. We'll hear from both of the directors of those programs. And then our budget updates. So we share budget updates every meeting. I didn't do the slideshow. I'm really sorry. Whatever, you can see it. All right, so the changes from last month are our recurring emails, monthly fee that we have for our subscription, and then we did have a couple of more school donations. And our speaker is here, and it might take just a second to get her presentation on the computer, so bear with us. Yeah, do you need help putting it on? Oh, yeah. We're going to take a few-minute intermission.
so much. Cool. Did you already do a warm welcome? Yeah. Okay. Hey, how was everyone? Sorry. I got stuck at the Capitol today. Nice to see everyone. I think I see familiar faces. As a reminder, I'm Alexis Sussdorf. I support the district at the Capitol in a lobbying capacity. I own my firm, State 48 Public Affairs, and help a variety of clients in a variety of spheres. But education is actually something near and dear. I've been doing education policy for, now 13 years. Early ed, I worked at Department of Ed for a while. I worked at Maricopa Community College. So really immersed in this policy topic, but I do represent clients in other spheres as well. So, and also a parent of 2 public school students over in Mesa. So definitely, the work at the Capitol and things going on at the Capitol is super personal to me because, I know the decisions that they make and the discussions that they have, are something that I take personally because I want to make sure that we stay focused on our kiddos, our student outcomes, and how we can pass policy with that in mind. So I'll just jump in. Again, apologies for being a little bit late. It is a super busy week. One of the biggest reasons they're keeping us super busy. Oh, they can't see it? Yeah. Yeah. No, you're good. Yeah. Yeah. However you do that. No, you're okay. I'll let you just do you.
Is on here. Let me open up the Window Explorer over here, and I'm going to go to this PC. If I can make it happen, it's probably over there. There it is.
Okay, go to
And I'm assuming. Oh, I'm sorry. You go ahead and get it.
Okay. Yep. Okay, there we go. Okay, so one of my slides with probably the most shocking information is the fact that we have 1,966 bills published, which typically when I do these presentations, I say we'd have around 1,600 to 1,800. Which is still far too many. We've gotten so many bills now that they've, for first time in history, gotten to an HB 4000. Nobody knew it would happen when they get past the 2000s. Senate bills are Senate Bill 1000s, House bills are House Bill 2000s, and then we never knew, do we go to House Bill 3000 or do we go to House Bill 4000? And so lucky me and lucky Arizona, we saw the first time in history House Bill 4000, and we're up to like House Bill 4150. So yeah, just a lot of volume this year. We've got a lot of very passionate legislators who are up for re-election in November, and so and they've got, especially a lot of the freshman legislators, got a year under their belt. So they used all that momentum to develop 1,966 bills. That's not even including the resolutions and some of the other things, the referrals that go forward. So just a tremendous amount of volume, but I can joke with you all, job security. Let's see. Yeah.
What percentage of the bills would you say have been introduced are positive for public schools?
Yeah.
Take the number of education bills and then say the percentage of those
Might be a subjective answer.
that would be helpful for public schools. What would you say? Just as like a level.
Yeah, so the question for those online was the number of positive versus negative public school bills. I guess my nonpartisan response would be that's, I guess, subjective. But in my world, I do feel like, at least for me as a parent in my parent lens, which I'm going to answer that way today because, I'm not really here on behalf of Scottsdale. I'm here to be supportive of the work that you guys do. But to me, staying focused on student outcomes and student achievement is the most important thing to me a legislator should do. And I feel like the sort of focus on administration and micromanaging seems to be a little bit more of the theme this year. So final answer is I just feel like staying focused on student outcomes should be the theme, and we've sort of somewhat lost track of that. Certainly understand the need for administrative accountability. I seek that goal as well because I certainly understand how that is important for a student success, is a district success, is a school principal success. So all of that sort of does trickle down, but ultimately staying focused on student outcomes to me is probably the better way for them to spend their time as a parent of 2 public school students. I also just mentioned this is a crazy week because it's sort of the final week of bills in the committee chamber of origin, which means anything that didn't make it past this major deadline, that's why I'm so late, because I've been in committees all week, and I've seen some people down there as well, but are essentially dead, which is so helpful to just understand and organize what is out there right now, because again, there's so much volume, it's just hard to know what's real and what's not real. Something you guys have probably been seeing a lot, and it is creating a lot of tension, is tax conformity. So there's substantial tax changes that are in play as a result of HR 1, the one big beautiful bill as reference. And typically tax conformity at the state level is we just sort of adopt the federal conformity, the federal provisions to make it easiest for the taxpayers, to make it the easiest for the tax professionals. But given the substantial changes of HR 1 and given some of the fiscal impact to our state, it hasn't been that simple as it was in past years, which is creating a lot of tension between the legislators. It's creating a lot of tension with our governor. As a reminder, our governor's a Democrat, our legislators are Republicans. So they're kind of clashing on what this looks like. And ultimately, why it's so problematic is because tax professionals need to know what the tax code is by April 15th or even well before, because people want to get that going. And we don't know what that is. So if they don't sort of get this moving quickly, a lot of people are going to have to submit amended returns. So it's creating a lot of tension. There's a lot of desire to get this done. But at the same time, people are feeling like the substantial impacts of HR 1 has fiscal impacts to Arizona's budget. And so the budget and the tax provisions should go hand in hand. And then no money is a theme that's also out there. We definitely, as a state, are seeing less and less revenue out there, and so it's creating a lot of challenges on how they're going to get the budget done. It's creating a lot of sort of challenges in how they're going to even break even this year, or where they're going to need to make cuts. And something I'm always vigilant on is education. K-12 education is the biggest funding bucket, and so when they need to make cuts, where do they go? Sometimes the biggest funding bucket. So it's just something we're watching out for, and I'm watching out for to just, again, circle back to making sure no cuts to K-12 education, because that impacts my kiddos' education experience. So in the vein of budget season, the sort of kickoff to budget is the governor gives her version of a budget, and then that marks the start of her negotiating with the House and Senate leadership to come up with something by June 30th. While we all wish that they would adopt a budget well before June 30th, just the political tensions and the party disagreements have resulted in us getting a budget right at the end in June, which is the school district's really tricky for them to be able to get everything done and approved by the board. And so just the later they pass a budget, the more challenging it is for everybody. But the executive budget, I highlighted the 2 things that I know a lot of school districts are really looking out for is district additional assistance, which is funding that the district gets and trickles down to the schools for a variety of school-related activities. And then it's called the free and reduced price lunch weight, which is kind of presumed as a poverty weight. So schools that have higher students on the free and reduced price lunch program get additional funds to support those schools. Those are 2 formula funds, so people are really nervous about those, because if those are on the chopping block, if those get cut, every school district is going to feel a cut in Arizona. But thankfully, the executive budget did include those items, but definitely looking out, when I look at everything out there, to me, those are the 2 that K-12 education is staying really focused on, to make sure we secure those 2 line items that are on the chopping block, because should those come to fruition, we would feel the impact at our schools, and our students will feel the impact. Yeah, so district additional assistance is a formula weight that school districts get. It is a statutory formula, but a couple years ago, we added additional funds to the formula. And it's really an opportunity. It's got a lot of flexibilities, but it's really focused on sort of the schools, the experiences, the student academic achievement. It's a little bit more of a flexible fund for schools to utilize with the focus of what the school needs. So it's a cut to something like that will be felt pretty widely. I'm sure, and we could probably access that, I'm sure Scottsdale probably has information about how they get their DAA and then where it goes, but it is one that a lot of schools are really focused on because it would be bad to go away.
Is this the override too?
No.
But is it the same, you can spend the money on the same things?
No.
They have a DAA override that's different from that? Okay, I was asking if so we have something, another funding opportunity for public schools.
Over the statutory override, but it's different. Yeah.
But they're like different buckets?
Yeah.
That's so annoying. Okay, anyway, there's an override that, at some point in the next few years, you'll probably hear about and that we'll be asked to pass that is named the same thing, but apparently it's different. Yes, so the district additional assistance override, which is not this, is used for capital. So things like textbooks or like playground structures, that's what you would have heard that for at the school district. No, I'm understanding this is probably different. Yeah.
Could be used for those. Could be used for those. Yeah. This is a fairly flexible lump sum that a school district can use for a variety of reasons. I kind of categorize it in more of like a general fund baseline item that the district can allocate sort of based on the needs of each school. So the override, no, you're okay. And I'm not a school finance expert, so, but the override, so the state sets the district additional assistance, and then the districts, any school district, including Scottsdale, has the ability to ask the voters to go up to 15% above the state set district additional assistance. So when you guys are going out for bonds and overrides, the district additional assistance override is essentially asking, hey, we get this much in district additional assistance, and we want the authority to have 15. I don't know what your override is. Some will go lower than 15, but it's up to 15%. Yeah. So those, and then the other one that people are always looking out for as well, also included in this, is just school facilities. So Arizona is perpetually challenged with school facilities issue across the state. And the consistent underfunding of school facilities has resulted in litigation amongst school districts. And so that is definitely one area that people are also looking out for to ensure we are at least allocating, I'd say $200 million is usually the baseline necessary. And again, this is for school facilities all across the state. Unfortunately, the formulaic kind of baseline of that right now is at, I believe it's either 16 or 18 million. So if you can imagine 16 or 18 million to hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars worth of needs. So that's another one people are always looking out for. And those are always sort of one-time iterations. They sort of fall in the bucket of, well, this is what we have left for school facilities, and that's why some of our school facilities are really in crippled situations, because we just have historically underfunded school facilities. Okay, so this one actually is something really relevant to you all, and that's why I wanted to go first. Some of you may be aware of some of the changes. Some of you may have been on some of the communication, but there has definitely been some changes on House Bill 20, or on how parent-teacher organizations collect information to be able to have parents participate in PTO. So it's always sort of historically been an opt-out situation, so you would be able to access parent email information unless they opted out of that purposely. And then we've kind of learned over time that oftentimes people opt out probably because they think that they get too much information, and then they say, oh shoot, I didn't mean to opt out, let me opt back in. So oftentimes the very few that do end up opting out, it's probably just a mistake, because this is information, right? All the great fundraisers you're doing, all the great things happening at your campus. So there was a change. It was a very, I don't want to say nebulous change, but something that no one really saw major impacts. It was really focused on student data. A change transpired that would, an unintended consequence was requiring school districts to now have to have PTOs, have parents opt in to receive the parent email information, which again, you're gonna probably, just knowing human nature, we're probably not gonna have very many people participate in the volume that you're used to, because before you would just get the information unless they opted out. So a huge change in the way PTOs gather information, are able to engage with parents. And so it was, again, completely unintentional, spoke with the sponsor, huge gaping hole that nobody really saw. That's the unfortunate reality of sometimes as we implement legislation, you start to unpack some of the things, and it does require corrections the next year. So thankfully, we are underway with the corrections, something that I've been working on in my personal capacity, because again, a parent of 2 Mesa public school students, alongside Kimberly and some other parents have joined me in their personal capacity to try to get this rectified. The funny part is nothing's ever easy in this world, and Kimberly very well could attest to that. Nothing is easy. There's just a lot of questions on, what are PTOs doing with this information? Is there political elements associated with this? And no matter how much we assure them or provide them information on different newsletters or information or communications that are going out, there is just the desire to ensure this is really tailored to only be PTOs, only giving information on the PTO activities, nothing else. And so we've been really working on trying to figure out an amendment that satisfies all the parties. I'm hopeful and optimistic we will get there and see this moving out of the House this week. But again, this was a very simple technical correction that, just given the nature of our political world, has definitely run into challenges. But again, that's the world. Kimberly, in your personal capacity, any thoughts or experience on this thus far? I'd love for you to share. Now you know what I get to go through every day.
It was really frustrating because you're just like telling them a simple issue, and then it's not a simple process to get this problem fixed. But I would like to tell all of you that we have already, like SPC already told the district that if this bill does not pass, it's that we need to have a brainstorming session with all the PTOs and the district to how we can let parents know and really kind of like work on our phrasing to get them to opt in, because we had a roundtable with what PTOs use this information for, and it's things like reaching out to kindergarten families in May or June, and they're like, and letting them know, like, here's what's going on. So it's very important. It's a very, as we all know, I'm sure all of you know, like I read my PTO letter all the time, and sadly this is on live stream, and it's way more informative than what my principal sends out. So it's a very important access to the school. So anyway, keep your fingers crossed for the legislature is all I'll say, and then we'll also work on Plan B if needed.
And then the other element to that is knowing the timeliness of needing to get this done. Typically, legislation takes effect 90 days after the legislative session. And again, they've been ending pretty late, so that's usually about September. And we know that's too late for this kind of issue to be resolved. So we are asking also for what's called an emergency clause added to the bill, which means if we get an additional vote threshold, that the bill would take effect immediately upon the governor's signature, but it makes it that much harder, right? It makes us have to get even more votes when we've already ran into some speed bumps through this. But ultimately, if we run the bill through with an emergency clause and for some reason it doesn't get the vote threshold it needs, doesn't stop the bill, it just takes that emergency clause off. But still, it kind of leaves you guys in limbo for several months as you need this information, but you ultimately can't access it until we hit that date that kicks into effect. So I really tried to narrow it, again, being a parent, of like what I think you guys need to know. There's so many bills, there's so much ed bills. I feel like I come in here and spew to you guys all these bills that are probably not relevant to you. So I try to do a little better this year of making sure this is really focused on things that are impacting schools and that can impact your school experience. Again, I'm trying to convey this as much in a nonpartisan fashion as possible and give you guys sort of the pros and cons that people shared throughout the committee process thus far. But these bills are moving through the legislative process right now, and things that you need to know as a parent. So House Bill 2033, statewide assessments. So this one would require statewide assessments administered in written format to be administered in written format if a majority vote of a governing board or charter governing body makes that decision. Right now, statewide assessment is primarily conducted online or on a computer. It's probably a better way to say that, with certain provisions that authorize opt-out or parent sort of written provisions if necessary, but they're fairly limited because the most expeditious way for us to get these statewide assessments done and get the information back to you is through this online format. And so this would make pretty substantial changes to the way statewide assessments are administered should this take effect. Beyond sort of the how a paper format would work in a large school district like Scottsdale or Mesa, which is mine, I'm sure the Department of Education is also has a lot of thoughts on this because they're also the entity responsible for our statewide assessment. So I think there's just a lot of questions in what this would work from an administration standpoint for some of our larger school districts, but ultimately something out there right now and moving. House Bill 2423, this one is specific to 6th and 8th grade students. It would require our schools to, if a student is in the highest proficiency of math, required to move them up to the next math course. That could be done through statewide assessment, some of just the benchmark assessments that are conducted, or a parent requesting it. So that is kind of an interesting provision to that. I'd say conceptually, in learning about this, a lot of people already do this, so that's not the problem. I think the problem is there's real, at least from what I'm being told, real detailed reporting associated with this, which can be quite cumbersome for school districts who want to stay focused on other elements of academic success. So this one, good in thought, definitely seems like in principle what most schools are doing anyway. It's just sometimes these administrative pieces can be pretty cumbersome for our school districts and charter schools. House Bill 2478, this one is an interesting one. I think it's a positive direction on creating a commission on student outcomes focused on a variety of topics: resource allocation, teacher compensation, academic innovation barriers, accountability systems. Very prescriptive on who would serve within that. It does, at this point in time, have a fairly dense participation of lawmakers, which I'm not sure how informed lawmakers are to be able to really make these types of decisions. So there was a lot of discussion to sort of change who would serve on this commission. Ultimately, when they're making these types of decisions, this is the responsible way to do it, right? Have a real detailed committee and commission, go through this for a while, and then bring forward policy recommendations to our legislature to improve these areas. So certainly the foundation is there. I just think the committee makeup would need to change a little bit to be a little bit less probably political. The one area a lot of people gave a lot of flack on this, and I think it needs additional room, is this $1 million for the classroom site fund. So they're trying to fund this commission out of an existing fund that school districts get. And the vision is, well, a lot of school districts have excess funds in this classroom site fund, so we'll just sweep a little bit from everybody to pay for this commission. It's a concerning premise to set, and then school districts do sometimes have additional funds sitting in the classroom site fund for a variety of reasons, including wanting to have stable budgets. So, the classroom site fund is something coming out of a variety of sources, but ultimately our sales tax is a substantial funder of that. And right now, sales tax is going down a little bit. And so there's a reason schools might have a little bit of a cushion in their classroom site fund, recognizing it could go down the next year because sales tax is going down the next year. So just one provision people are looking at to potentially suggest utilizing a different fund source that doesn't sort of take the existing funds from school districts and charter schools. Yeah. Oh, sorry. No, I'm like, why is that slide empty?
My question was, if you go back, that 1 million that you're talking about, that 1 million, they're paying for a commission. What exactly who are they paying with that 1 million? Are they paying the commission members for their service, or what are they actually paying for?
I want to be on that commission if we get paid. Yeah. No. So the vision is the commission is going to need to, it's going to be sort of an independent authority. and it would need to be staffed. The sponsor of the bill talked about having 5 full-time staff. And I do also want to, I actually even further clarified, this is intended, the intent of the bill as conveyed in committee was $1 million a year for 5 years. So we're talking about essentially $5 million over 5 years. But the intent is hiring 5 full-time staff and then bringing in experts, bringing in consultants along with that to be able to do the work to create the sort of policy ideas out of this commission. Yeah. Yeah, question, how does it differ? That was a big dialogue, is there were some legislators wanting to understand how this was different than some of the existing governance bodies, Department of Education. I will say the State Board of Education, which is a policy-making body, did get up there and say, you know, this is sort of our wheelhouse. The sponsor of the bill did sort of respectfully disagree that ultimately this did need sort of that independent commission authority. But you are not wrong, that was part of the dialogue, was, is this necessary? Because we do have bodies that do this. But, you know, ultimately, we'll see where it lands. Another one, House Bill 2838, this one actually just moved yesterday. This one creates, and I think it's really interesting, it's creating a new pilot program for high school student graduation. It authorizes 4 school districts and 1 charter school to be able to apply to be able to, and not, sorry, I shouldn't say school districts, 1 school site, 1 charter school site, and then 4 traditional public school sites, so your school instead of the district, to participate in this, and ultimately trying to come up with an innovative way of student graduation beyond the sort of rigid existing state graduation requirements that exist. It is interesting. There's a lot of conversation right now about graduation requirements. There's a lot of interest from the legislators to think about innovative pathways than what's required now. But this did make some legislators nervous to say, is this just a pathway for us to reduce the graduation requirements that some believe may already be too low? So did provoke a lot of interesting conversation. I'll say learning about this pilot program, and you know, it could be something that a Scottsdale school participated in. The intent and the people that spoke on this saw this as an opportunity for maybe higher performing school sites to have sort of innovative models. There was an example used of really wanting to just fully immerse concurrent enrollment, meaning this a substantial student population will just go to the community college site, but the school would provide some sort of academic supports for these students through that work. So just kind of interesting, but I do sort of bring it to your attention because I think there is a lot of interest about graduation requirements right now and creative pathways, and I really think it could bubble up to sort of how it impacts your kiddos that are in those high school ages. House Bill 2034, I flag this one. It's pretty technical, but it is a specific piece of legislation impacting our career and technical education districts and the partnerships that school districts have with EVIT. So if you have been following a little bit, Scottsdale is one of the 9, so is my school district, one of the 9 in litigation with the East Valley Institute of Technology, EVIT. All of it sort of gets down to these satellite sites and the school funding associated with that, and school districts not feeling like they're getting their fair share, or even feeling like they get their fair share. It's been a bit of a disagreement now in the judicial sphere. So right now it is in the courts, but this is legislation that is trying to not necessarily rectify this situation snapshot in time, but should something like this ever come up again where there's disagreements on the contracts between our CTED, EVIT, or any of the other CTEDs across the state, like WestMech on the west side, this would hopefully create a process, sort of that appeals process necessary. But was interesting testimony yesterday, just to sort of see the 2 perspectives of this, and ultimately it does seem like there's a desire for this to be solved in the courts first before legislation does move forward. But something I'm watching closely because it does impact Scottsdale, it does impact a lot of East Valley schools. And so it's just something I'm watching closely to see where this lands. Senate Bill 1746, I put this on your radar because I'm always thought it's interesting that there is always a desire to use school sites for polling places. There's a big challenge to identify polling places, and there has been quite a bit of movement over the last decade to require schools to serve in those locations. A lot of schools will say, well, you know, our elections are getting kind of messy now, and I don't know if I feel comfortable having that on our site for that reason. And so they have come up over the years with a slew of sort of ways to compel schools to serve in polling locations. This is trying to mitigate that talking point by requiring closure of the school to serve as a polling location. So I just say it to you because as a parent in an elementary space, absolutely we may have a great cafeteria that's actually pretty accessible to parking and such, but just knowing the way that elections operate, how heated things are right now, I feel a little bit discomfort with my school being a polling site. And so I just kind of flag this to you all because it just seems to continue every year to bubble up in the election space. And I just think parents need to be aware of this. And if you feel as passionate as I do, just making them aware about, your thoughts within this space, because I feel a little bit discomfort just having 2 kiddos in elementary school. The chances of going through, I will say likely to not get all the way up, given sort of it's not had likeliness to get through the legislative process. But I mean, there has been some iteration like this every year for at least the last 5 years. So they're certainly not done trying. And so their momentum can't be lost, because at some point in time, either they're gonna give up or we're gonna give up. And I don't want parents to give up, because this to me is, in a personal capacity, is a non-starter. I also think about so many of the weirdos, right? Like there's just so, the school off, I know. And this is probably a bit, this one has school required to be closed. I'm a working mom. Like, what am I supposed to do? There's a lot of elements of this that I think we can poke holes on for sure. Yeah. Correct. Yeah, the question for those online is this a mechanism to open more polling places? Exactly, because the counties are having a heck of a time identifying polling places now for the reason I just said. Nobody wants to be these sites of ruckus, because that's what they're turning into. And so people are now, that may have historically served as polling places, say, I can't handle that anymore. I don't have the security. I don't have the capacity. It's protesting that's happening. So it is an issue that counties are stretched thinner and thinner on, and have been over the last decade. And so our legislators are trying to identify solutions. I appreciate that. It's just the solution of compelling it to be a school site and then furthering to say school will close on that school site. You just might have an opinion on that, and I certainly do in my personal capacity. So. Just a couple other things you need to know. There's so many other bills, so I just sort of put some of the big themes that are moving through. Bond and override language, I mentioned this, but there every year and continues to be interest to tinker with authorities of school districts on bond and override language, what the bond has to say, what the override has to say, being very prescriptive, requiring, now this year's kind of newer theme is requiring school districts before they enter into these bond conversations to hire very specific types of advisors. And I think just ultimately the dialogue on this has been a lot of school districts might do this, but having a one-size-fits-all to just hire this person without sort of understanding the context or dynamic. Some school districts said, we might only go for a couple $1 million bond. Do we really need to go through the rigmarole and hiring these people? Yes, if it's a multi-million-dollar bond, maybe, but a one-size-fits-all for maybe a smaller bond might not be necessary. So that's been a big theme. It continues to be a big theme, but just something that concerns me, because for me in Mesa, that's a really important tool for us to have, should we put something like that in play for our school infrastructure. So another, it's just a major theme. You all may follow some of the Tolleson School District issues. This seems to be in the news quite a bit, but the superintendent has definitely been under fire for some of his business decisions, under fire for the way that his contract was negotiated at the local level. And ultimately, sort of this really narrowed situation has opened the door for at least a dozen bills targeted at the Tolleson superintendent, but has implications on school districts across the state. And it is conveyed by proponents of challenging to recruit and retain high-quality talent when we do these types of workforce attacks. So something just to look out for. The others just really trying to be tailored in performance pay and other areas of compensation. So just something that seems to be a major theme this year, targeted at an unfortunate situation for a specific school district, but the rest of the school districts are certainly impacted by these types of policy decisions. School district space and leases, another big theme this year. Areas such as reducing right now a statutory threshold to establish leases, changing that from 20 years to 10 years. There's sort of two different opposing ideas. There's an area to completely prohibit the ability for various types of leases, like leasing land for what's called kind of a teacherage concept, so a recruitment or retention ability. But then there's a whole different bill that authorizes new authorities in that space. So it's just interesting to see this is a really big theme this year, school district space and leases. And so something that, looking out for, because it would impact school districts and potentially impact your schools with either these new authorities or authorities that are taken away. The other big one, statewide assessment. I gave you one example, but there's a couple other bills out there about statewide assessments, not only the one for the written assessment, but also trying to prescribe new testing windows. A lot of discussion around our state accountability system, that A through F system that you guys understand. There's interest to change what's called the cut score, so that would change the area that your school district is in, or your school is in. There's an interest to entirely eliminate what's called the growth metric and only have proficiency as the only metric, which for schools that may have a different student population really rely on that growth metric, because they might get they might have a larger special needs population. They may have a much larger English language learner population. I was just talking to one superintendent this morning on this, not Scottsdale, but she has a 67% English language learner population. So it's going to be really challenging for her to show proficiency, but growth she will and should show. So there's just a lot of questions about that in the legislative sphere, as well as sort of in the bigger State Board of Education, Department of Education sphere for you to be aware of. Lastly, Prop 123 updates. So I think I covered this last year. It did fall short last year, but these are the various packages to increase use of our state land trust for public education dollars. Last year, there was a lot of attention given on this topic because the existing percentage out of the state land trust was going to be dropping from 6.9% to 2.5%. Ultimately, that fund was already baked into our state budget, because that the funding was put in place originally to settle a lawsuit. So we didn't feel, when they changed that from 6.9% out of the state land trust to drawing just 2.5% of the state land trust, we didn't feel the impacts in education. But the the fact that this fund dropped down with nobody winning in K-12 public education was a pretty big disappointment. People wanted to see Prop 123 renewed because the fund has been really healthy, the state land trust is thriving, and so there is certainly no reason to keep the amount that we're allowed to draw annually out of the state land trust at 2.5%. All of the economists say we can stay at 6.9% forever, and we will never jeopardize the corpus of that fund. So just a real big missed opportunity last year. We could not come up with the right formula to bring that legislation to the voters to renew Prop 123. But it's up again. More conversations are happening. To me, people are going to coin it in the renewal space, although we have had a year off from that fund, so it's really not a renewal. It's kind of a new concept now, but there's a lot of disagreements in how we do this. And it's not even always just a partisan disagreement. There's even disagreements within the parties of how they do this. How do you draw this fund out? What does it go to? What does it not go to? How do we monitor it? What do we add to it? So it's so interesting to see this all play out, because typically at our legislature, there's a lot of partisanship between the Republicans and Democrats. On this one, absolutely partisanship's in play, but I also see the inter-party dynamics of certain Democrats feeling this way, certain feeling this way, certain Republicans saying, I don't want this, and then others saying, I don't want this. So it's fascinating. I really, today it did move through our Senate Education Committee, but it does have a long road, and I'm not entirely sure, given the big election coming up, I'm not sure there's all the momentum there to get this done, but it is out there on the table, and an opportunity for additional funding for K-12 education should we get organized. Question? Yep. So the question was, if those Prop 123 bills for a second year don't get moved forward, is it going to be in the budget? Yes. The state land trust dollars that in 2015 were passed by the voters to settle a lawsuit, they were always planning for it was a 10-year sunset. So everyone for 10 years was planning, when we get to the 10-year mark, we have to have a plan for the general fund, just in case the voters choose to not do that. Because if they didn't, we'd be back in court again saying, you violated the lawsuit or you violated the settlement. So, but this is an opportunity, one of the very few opportunities. At the beginning of my presentation, I talked about poor revenues. This is one of the only areas we'll be able to generate additional revenue. But there's, again, disagreements on how we do that. So, I continue to advocate. I certainly, see the importance of additional funds for K-12 education, focusing on my students' outcomes in Mesa. So just something I'll be watching and monitoring. But in my professional opinion, I feel like we're going to fall short again, just because I'm not feeling the interest in this topic quite as much as I did last year. But the fact that they moved it today makes me think they're going to try to keep it alive. But the desire to just get tax conformity and get a budget done before June 30th is a hurdle in itself. So if they're adding a whole nother layer of a ballot referral, I think it's pretty far-fetched, but I'm going to root for Prop 123 because I do see it as an opportunity. Now, I want to root for good policy in Prop 123. The nuances, just saying, yes, let's do Prop 123, really understanding the nuances is the work that I do. But I'm certainly rooting for good Prop 123 policy. And that's my contact information. You guys can call me anytime. Again, I do this in professional capacity for Scottsdale, but I also do this in my personal capacity because I believe in parents and what we do and our power. So please feel free to reach out to me anytime. Thank you. Questions? Sorry, I was very scatterbrained today. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for coming. I know how schools are funded in Arizona is very confusing. I do not have all the answers, but you can try me, and if I don't know, then I'll direct you to Alexis or someone else who does know. Like our school district CFO knows a lot too. But yeah, thank you so much for coming. I already did our executive board board updates earlier in the meeting. So we hopefully will see you at our March meeting, which is athletics. Have a good night.